As part of my job at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers, or FLETC, I would sometimes take officers and recruits for the Bureau of Prison, or BOP, as hostages. And I think in part because of the Supreme Court's reversal of the Voting Rights Act and what that means for our society. I've been thinking lately about one particular incident I had with a guard going through the training pipeline who had a neo-Nazi tattoo. Let me give you a bit of context. I was what is called a roleplayer for the Department of Homeland Security, and I played the bad guy for the federal agencies out there. The Bureau of Prisons, or BOP, sends its employees through the training pipeline before they can work in a federal prison and take care of people like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Most of the time I dealt with BOP, it was for simple scenarios like pat-downs or learning how to put handcuffs or restraints on. A lot of times the scenarios involved contraband or breaking up some fights. But there was one scenario that I was particularly good at and called in for a lot, and that was leading the dreaded prison riot and hostage situation. Everyone who wants to work at BOP has to go through this. Before they come to the FLETC base, they know this will happen, they just don't know how or when. And the base has a mock prison with jail cells and everything. So when the time comes, the students are caught off guard and the inmates take over the prison and take them hostages. It is very chaotic, violent, and loud. Different weapons are used, people are screaming and yelling, and a lot of people panic. Now the reality is for us, it's just one big chaotic but controlled game. Nobody is actually going to get hurt, right? The whole thing is scripted. There are instructors that are monitoring the whole thing. But it is very intense and very dehumanizing. And people respond in different ways, good and bad. I've seen people show a lot of courage, restraint, and self-sacrifice. But I've also seen people throw away their careers because they threw their teammates to the wolves for a chance to escape. There are two purposes for this training scenario. First, these riots and hostage situations happen more than people realize, and so it's good to have some experience in case it happens in real life. Second, it's also a way to make sure that the people going through the training are fit for the job. So that's the context of my interaction with this one guy. During the hostage scenario, the best way for me to read people was through their tattoos. That's how I got to them. Maybe they had the names or date of birth of a child or a spouse. We would threaten to go visit them after finding out where a guard was from. Different Bible verses, military tattoos, or symbols would tell me what they valued, and it could all be used against them. So this one time I was walking through the ranks of the trainees when a tattoo caught my eye. It was a massive black sun tattoo. Now the way the scenario is set up, this guy could not see me. So I approached from the side and poked him under the ribcage with a weapon and said, looks like we have a purist here. German kind? 1930s? He immediately blurted out, "It's a Viking Sunwheel." I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. It is not impossible that the guy was an honest Norse pagan, right? Or that the original symbol had been co-opted by neo-Nazis. This happens. Maybe it was a mistake or a misunderstanding, and the guy would turn out to be someone like Graham Platner, turning his life around for the better. But based on the rest of my interaction with this guy, I highly doubt it. But I wanted to be sure, so I looked it up when I got home. And not only was this not a pagan symbol to start out with, but it was specifically designed and invented in Nazi Germany by the SS. The next day, I spoke with one of the BOP instructors and told him about my observation and interaction with the student, as well as my reservation about having someone with those tattoos inside the federal government, especially in a role where he would be guarding gang members and white supremacists. I was thanked for bringing that to their attention. They would keep an eye on him, but unfortunately, there was nothing they could do. I was told that they are not being vetted for that anymore. At the end of each hostage situation, there's a long debrief. People often have mental breakdowns or PTSD flare ups. But once the debrief is done, each role player walks in front of the class of roughly 50 or so students to introduce themselves, explain who they were, what they did, and offer some words of appreciation and encouragement. The goal is to rehumanize us and the experience, which is pretty traumatic. I would usually start with um, sorry about that. And usually they were kind enough to chuckle and laugh along with me. But I would always end it the same way. I would tell them, you are going into an inhumane world. Hold on to your humanity by not losing sight of the humanity of the person in front of you. Now, I didn't invent this, right? I just approached the world through the lens of Stoic philosophy. And for the Stoics, one idea is that you can be hurt without being harmed. In fact, it is harmful for you to hurt others because harm refers to something that degrades you in your moral character and to who you are as a human being. I like Epictetus's take on this. Tell me what you make of it. He says, a man can be thrown in prison and not be harmed. Who is the person who is truly harmed and suffers the most pitiful and shameful fate? The one who, instead of being human, turns into a wolf, a viper, or a wasp. Epictetus says the greatest harm a person can suffer is the loss of the most valuable good, the ability to make good choices because of bad judgment. This man who has fallen into error and is mistaken about the most important matters, and thus has gone blind, not with regards to eyesight, which distinguishes white from black, but with regards to judgment, that distinguishes good from bad. I was flying through the Atlanta airport the other day, and they have a glass display of Martin Luther King Jr.'s suit and a book that he was reading, has some notes on. I find this last saying by Epictetus pretty close to what MLK said, right? About being judged, not based on the color of skin, right? Black and white, but by the content of character, good and bad. Here's what I like about Epictetus. It would be easy to be dismissive or hateful of people who we judge to have bad character, right? But this is what Epictetus says. Just as we pity the blind and the lame, shouldn't we take pity on those who have become blinded and crippled in their judgment? Where in human beings is the great good and evil to be found? In that which distinguishes them as humans. If one's self-respect and fidelity and intelligence are kept unimpaired, then the human being himself is safeguarded. But if any of these are destroyed, then he himself is destroyed. All that is great in human affairs turns on this. And I find this kind of ironic about supremacists of any kind, right? By losing sight of the humanity and value of others due to race, background, culture, belief, or whatever, they lose their own. And the challenge for us, or for me anyways, is not to suffer the same fate when dealing with them. And it is hard. Things are hard in our human affairs, and I don't have to remind anyone that things are not great. But here's something worth remembering. They never really are. That book I talked about that's displayed at the MLK glass case in the Atlanta airport, it's Man in Society and Calamity, published in 1942, right in the middle of the Second World War. This is a picture that I took of the book. In it, you can see where MLK underlined. The totalitarian trend is covered now by communist ideology, now by Nazi philosophy. In spite of the disparity of the ideologies and slogans, right, this is not necessarily a left-right or Democrat versus Republican problem. The central phenomenon remains essentially constant, namely the expansion and tightening of government control, that is, a shift towards totalitarianism. And then the book lists the history of Egypt, Babylonia, Iran, Greece, Rome. This is the world of Epictetus and the Stoics, right? India, China, Japan, the Muslim world, the Inca Empire, medieval and modern Europe, and America. And I think this is the trend we're seeing in America today. In the book, MLK underlined how this trend is defined by one particular thing: a militaristic state or a state at war. The book says, nations that have been most frequently involved in strenuous wars exhibit, even in normal times, which these are not, right, a social political regime much more totalitarian than that of peaceful societies. Look at our trend in the United States. We're coming out of 25 years of war in the Middle East. We're back at it with Iran. Before that, it was Venezuela. We bombed Nigeria, Somalia, Yemen, and Syria. Cuba is probably next. At home in the United States, the military has been deployed to cities of blue states, and we have threatened to take by force both Canada and Greenland. And now, the Trump administration is asking for a military budget of $1.5 trillion. So things aren't great at the moment, nor are they great in a lot of places in the world. But here's my thought. We don't choose the time and place of our birth. We don't choose the color of our skin, and we only somewhat choose where we live. But since this totalitarian trend is as universal as it is constant, those factors don't matter. What matters is how you choose to live in this inhumane world of ours. Hold on to your humanity by not losing sight of the humanity of those around you.